Stop it.
Okay, so we continue chapter 302, the 74th discourse of Ayin Beis, page 613. Before I begin, I was asked a question that many of us have, even though it's not directly relevant, but who makes the decisions? So we talked about the two approaches. Nefesh, the soul on its own, could want too much ayin, too much subliminity, to be too sublime, and its own desire not get out of its comfort zone, and thus leaving the body to its own recourse. Or there can be a joining of forces, which is the healthy balance. They work together and do Teshuvah together. Each one does its part, and they complement each other. So the question was asked, who decides these things? When you have this battle between Zev and Zeh Shelton, like he says in Tanya, two voices within us. So sometimes the explanation is given nefesh hasichus, that we have a third soul called the intelligent spirit, the intelligent soul, that's a deciding this decider. But the truth is, when you really think about it, before we get into deciding between two things, a human being, from the moment we're born, is governing their lives. A baby cries when it's hungry, stops crying when it gets food. So who's calling the shots? Who's running the show? So the best possible way to explain it is think of it like an invisible captain of a ship. There's a ship is the body, and there's a captain of the ship. Or Irktan is the human body is like a small town city, and there's a governor, there's a mayor, there's a leader. Now this leader is not necessarily good or bad. This leader just governs. The captain can run the ship foul, or the can run the ship properly. Many things that we do, whether you're going to walk this street, you're going to walk that street, whether you're going to eat or not eat, whether you're going to breathe or not breathe. So naturally, there are natural impulses in the body that tell the captain this is what has to be done, and it's just done. It becomes habit, routine, nature. But then there are choices made. Not getting down whether it's real choices, whether God leads the footsteps of a person or not. No, God leads the footsteps. So we can make a decision whether you're going to invest here, do this or do that, travel here, travel there, walk this street, that street. But there is a captain. And then this same captain hears two voices within the spirit. One called the divine voice, one is the animal voice, Ma'aban. And this captain sometimes follows this, sometimes follows that. By a tzaddik, you can say, like Moshe, like he discussed, the body has been so refined that the captain is, in effect, the divine soul. The divine soul has so impacted the person's control, you can say that's in control. By most of us, like he says in Tanya, the animal soul is more or less in control. From time to time, the divine soul weighs in. It weighs in all the time, but it sometimes has impact. He says the divine soul rests in the mind, the animal soul in the heart. But it's not the mind that makes the decisions, it's not the heart that makes the decisions. You could say it's the will. Our desire, our willpower, like he speaks in Ayin Beis, the beginning. Will is the first interface. The first thing that you want something else, so that causes a connection to the thing you want. You don't want it, there will be no connection. Same thing with the divine essence is to desire. But will itself is just a word. Will is, you can say, a faculty of this captain, or you want to call it the captain, it's called the captain. So I think that when we talk about a human being, who makes decisions? We have the conscious human being or the unconscious. Is it the unconscious that controls our decisions? I would say the captain is probably a combination of factors, but it's probably a element connected to the unconscious. Now we know Ratzon and Tainuk, which is will and desire, or desire and pleasure, are two forces from that inner captain. That's how I would explain it. And it remains somewhat mysterious because we're not in the engine room. We don't see this captain. We see the ship going this way, that way. We see people doing things. The captain is an invisible force. And clearly, a person that no longer has a soul, meaning after death, after 120 years, there's no one to control this, the body ceases to function. So clearly it's connected to faculty of the spirit, but I wouldn't say it's a faculty that's in one particular place. It is the person choosing, the person moving. So Ratzon is definitely the words used as, let's call it the tool. That may be Ratzon may be the steering wheel of the captain. But the captain itself is the spirit behind the Ratzon and the timing. Let's continue now. Chapter 302. Where we're up to is, he's covered two types of dysfunctionality of the soul and the body, which reflect the two types, the first two types in the world of Teshuvah. And briefly, type 1, where the ayin, the the energy is in its place, it can be intense, it has an awakening, it has inspiration, it's very deeply disturbed and distressed over its plight in this material world. But bottom line is it does not impact on the container. They discussed how it's temporary, and ultimately it's about itself. It doesn't want to get out of its comfort zone. It wants to get out of this place. But it doesn't have a cheshbon, a calculation, accounting, how to do it, strategy. Look at the things that are inappropriate in this world, in your life. Correct them. Look at the beauty of God sending you to this world and the power, the potential that the dam, the resistance can create in you. Intensity. That it doesn't do. In a balanced situation, it does do. And he spoke about two types of inspiration. One, he said in general that the soul is not happy with its plight in this world. And the second is not happy and doesn't make a cheshbon, calculation. And the second is that it's deeply distressed over the details of sumrava seitev, avoiding the negative and doing the positive, and it brings it to a deep distress, a deep emotional reaction. It calls it a spiralisdika that had nishta primisdika. It's an emotional reaction, not an internal one. The bottom line is it does not welcome and invite in the nefesh, the guf and nefesh abamis into the process. So you have the oyer here, the keli there, the soul here, the body there. They don't join. The body remains in its place. When they do join, they both do tshuva together. So nefesh abamis feels the pain because it's the culprit in a way. It's the cause. And it also comes from the world of klippa. And the nefesh elokis feels the pain because it's closer to what it's more aligned to God's desire and God's will. It sees that it's against God's will. It senses more the defilement of being of doing things wrong in this world. It senses the golus hashchina, how the shchina is affected by it. And the bottom line is a strategy of what to do about it. Organized strategy, step by step, how to counter the challenges and to realize the benefits of the efforts down below. When it's not balanced, two different worlds. That's dysfunctional number one. First type of imbalance. Second imbalance is, he says, the other extreme from the perspective of the container. He adds in the summary that even the soul is not as energized as, let's say, in type 1. But above all, the body, the guf and nefesh abamis, is very porous, it's very weak, soft, very little resistance. So you don't really have a container. You have something that is overwhelmed quickly breaks. And it's not that the soul worked. There's an effort of refining the body and guf and nefesh abamis. On its own, it just has this porousness, this lack of spine and weak state. So right away it becomes bottle. And as he explains, it's not really in detail. It's not like because it recognizes and appreciates and comprehends and feels the divine elements. It's nature. So overall, it just gets overwhelmed. It's an example of a person who's, let's say, fundamentally low self-esteem. So it's not like his being was transformed. Moshe was an onav. His humility came from strength. He transformed his container to be aligned with his soul and was knowing his strengths. This type of individual is weak. So the keli is like as if it doesn't exist. So you have the opposite, that the energy simply doesn't have a partner because the container has completely sublimated itself, and its nature is such. So it's the second type of dysfunctionality. Um, you know, he doesn't speak here how to repair that. Because is this a personality thing? Can the person choose? Is there an avodah that a person like this can do to not be so, to build up his containers? I would assume, maybe later we'll talk about it, that building up containers would be building up self-esteem, building up your personality, to be a partner, to be, you have to be someone. It would be the equivalent, like someone came to me many times, they start learning chassidus, they start learning Torah, Yiddishkeit. They grew up, let's say, in a secular home, secular environment. They right away want to put on a kapota, move to Crown Heights, and start learning 24/7. I told them, no, it's not. Stay where you are, your job, your friends. Your job is to bring God where you are, not to suddenly be consumed and overwhelmed. And not to say they're weak people, it's that they're so inspired, and maybe their resistance was broken due to their difficult life, or maybe that just personality. They're very, as he said, they're very receptive and but the containers have to remain. And containers mean you have to remain as a personality, because we need both of them. You don't need a person who just becomes a shmata, a rag, a doormat. You need a person that has kelim, build the kelim. So there are ways to counter it. He doesn't. In the first of this type, he discussed what it's supposed to look like. They join together. This one, he just said what doesn't work. But the bottom line is that these are the two types of imbalance. Now, chapter 302 continues. This is the bottom of page 613. It says, Vihine now, Vishnei Fanima now, these two types of dysfunctionality of imbalance, they're both not aligned to the higher kavanah, the higher purpose in the descent of the soul down below. There's a purpose why the soul descends down below. What's the purpose? The kavanah, the purpose of the soul's descent is to radiate, to illuminate the body. L'takne, to repair it, ulazachachai, and to refine it, ulahoyer chelke be'el, and to radiate and illuminate his corner of the world, your part of the world, his part of the world. So there's a purpose. He said to illuminate the body, to repair it, to refine it, and to illuminate your part of the world. So it's a whole job. There's a mission here. That means very clearly that the whole avodah, the whole work of the soul below, is to have a relationship and connection to the body and the natural soul. Because that's the purpose. It was sent for a reason. It didn't just fall into this earth for no reason. The reason was to have it, to accomplish something with his body and in the part of your world and your part of the world. So it has to have a connection to it. For the soul to pull back and suddenly say, I'm out of here, or I don't want to have this, is hepech hakavana. Like it says in the pasuk where it talks about servants, that by Shemitah, Yovel, they have to be released because God says, Kili, to me, the children of Israel are servants, and not servants to my servants. So, Kili b'nei Yisrael avodim she'erdim avidasim l'zachas haguf v'nefesh ha'tiris. They're avodim, meaning they're servants. What are they servants? To serve God, to serve by refining the body and the natural soul. V'avedus haneshama amitis mitzadas, in the parentheses he has now. And the true work of the soul, mitzadas on its own, zeu schar avedasa. That's the reward for its work. In other words, its reward is the mere fact that is doing this work. Like we say, Tefillah de Shabbos, Lisanag al Hashem, in order to have pleasure with God, in God. Shazel Kabbalah Schar. The Misha Torah be'erev Shabbos dafka ba'aved b'sheish v'chel yechel b'Shabbos k'mon shekos v'makam achar. So in Tefillah Shabbos you have the pleasure of God, which is the reward, because it says someone who works, toils. Before Shabbos or erev Shabbos, this is like Friday, or you could say the whole week. So someone dafka, specifically, explicitly toils before Shabbos ba'aved in the work of the 6 days of the week, is the one that eats on Shabbos. So by the mind, he's saying that the work, the effort that the soul makes, which is against its nature, but it's an effort, that is its reward. Because by that work, that's what causes us to then eat on Shabbos and have the pleasure with God. What does he want to add here? Maybe he wants to say that the schar is not that the soul leaves the body and goes back to its place. That the avodah itself is trying to make it even more part of the soul's benefit. That the benefit that the soul benefits directly from it, because this is what gives the soul, this is what gives it pleasure. Maybe something what he said similar, that the resistance down below is also good for the soul. It's not just good for the body, because the soul builds up its strength, its intensity, commitment. V'hainu hein basic ateidah mitzvos. Back outside the parentheses. And that is, he's talking about how it refines the body and the natural soul. V'hainu hein basic ateidah mitzvos. Both in its efforts, in its work, in its toiling in Torah and mitzvos, in studying Torah and doing mitzvos. Then beginning, initially, when a person begins to serve, he serves for his own interest. For his own soul's interest. In order to refine his soul. The Torah is called strength and strength, the teshia, and a force that we can. What? No. Ezra teshia, counseling. Teshia, yeah, you could say counseling, but Ezra teshia also means strength, the teshia, and a force that weakens. Like he says, shemateshes. Teshia comes also the word that it weakens. Shemateshes keich nefesh abamis. It tames. It humbles. The word supplement. It weakens the power of the animal soul. And it strengthens the power of the divine soul. So Torah is called Oiz V'Sashiyah. It gives Oiz, strength to the divine, and weakening of the nefesh abamis. That's the work. V'zeh im ba'atikun. And this itself is talking about different ways how this divine, how the work of the soul with the body works. This can be whether it's with the repair that comes to Torah itself, this can be this type of work is either the Torah itself, or how the Torah helps in the avodah, in the service of prayer. Like we learned earlier, chapter 176. Okay. He's basically spelling out here the different ways that the Shama works together with the body to refine it, which is the purpose, the mission for which it was sent here. So he started with Hainu basically Torah. So start with Torah. So now he gave two things, whether it's Torah itself or it's Torah with Tefillah. Now he's going to say, for who, and this is because Sheyesh Chilukim Madreges b'Neshamas. It's all details in the service itself, because there's different levels of souls. Yesh Neshamas Dikar Avidas B'Tefillah. There are souls that their primary work is in prayer. The B'Tefillah who is Galos Hakechas Nefesh Lekis, because in prayer in prayer you have the revelation of the divine, the faculties of the divine soul. Like we spoke earlier in the previous discourse when he spoke about how the person prepares to daven. So first the keli has to empty itself. It's bitla yesh. And then it allows during prayer the divine faculties to emerge. And then you get to the bitla mitzvos. It took there, if you remember the avodah, which is very much should be compared to these chapters, because there he's talking about the avodah of the countering the imbalance of Er and Keli not working together. So one of them was tefillah, where you could have davening, which was very similar to what he said in the last chapter, where you can daven, and then afterwards there's no effect at all, because the Keli was not part of it. You got to wait. And the compartmentalization that he discusses. So there are souls that are primarily to prayer. And in prayer, you have these gals keches and nefesh umatishim es kechen nefesh habamis, and also the weakening of the power of the animal soul. However, this is how does it take place? It's through the help, the support of Torah, the Torah that you learn before davening. So that's one type of soul. So one type of souls, their main primary thing is tefillah, prayer, but they need Torah as a preparation that helps support their primary function. The yesh neshamas sheikra v'dasim mo'esek haTorah. He's elaborating because, as I said, he's spelling out the method. This is now the formula that how it should work, how soul should work with the body. He's just giving different ways. But either way, it's all about working, refining, channeling, and weakening the animal power, strengthening the soul's power. There's a relationship. And there are souls whose primary work is through the yoke, through the exertion in Torah, Asik, the work of Torah. Through Torah itself, and then the Torah itself, you have the strengthening, domination, the power, empowerment, the intensification of the divine soul, and the weakening of the power of the animal soul. So there's two ways to weaken the animal, to empower the divine and weaken the animal. One is prayer with the strength, with the help and support of prayer, the Torah before it. And the second is through Torah itself. Two different types of neshamas. Obviously, both need both. Just the question, what's their primary role? Now he adds in the parentheses, again, he goes back to the reward. That when a person learns the Shema, which means with no ulterior motive, for the inyan itself, for the cause itself. Because before, if you remember the last line, it says in the beginning, you start working for yourself, adaita the nafsha, which means to repair your soul. There's a reason in that. There's an objective. It's a good objective, but it's not just selfless with no ulterior motive. There is a motive. The motive is to fulfill the purpose, which is to refine the soul, the animal soul in the body. Now he says in the parentheses, when a person learns for the Shema, as an end in itself, this is the reward of the soul. Similar to what he said before, but the reward is through the work. And even this, even though you're learning just Torah L'Shma, because it's God's Torah, you're not thinking, oh, I'm learning the Torah in order for it to strengthen my soul and to weaken my animal soul, to strengthen my divine soul. But even this, when you learn just for Torah itself, just to learn Torah, even this has an element of refinement and repair of the general world. Rabbi Yehuda Kula Tnuya ben Nezikin. Is it Rabbi Yehuda? Yeah. Huh? It's Rabbi Yehuda. That this Rebbe, Kula Tnuya ben Nezikin, all his teachings, all his studies, all his learning was in the chapter, in the category, the subject of Nezikin, are damages. You know, we know there's 6 tractates in the Talmud. One is Nezikin, deals with all the laws of damages, litigation, etc. So this Rabbi Yehuda, Kulam Tanui the Nezikin. Mom shorts Rabbi Yehuda. I stand corrected if it's not. So what does this mean? He's giving the inner meaning of it. That all his study was Nezikin, meaning his study was to repair the world. Which is Nezikin, is the damages in the world in order to find the right halacha, the right law, the right legal rulings of how to deal with the difficulties in this world. And this is just for learning. She's trying to say, all the learning has been zikin to so-called repair the damages in the world, which means not to repair the damages, but in the areas of the world that need repair. It means clarity that comes through learning. So this learning is coming to teach us how to live a healthy life in this world, and not one where we damage each other and the different elements, all the laws referring when people hurt each other. And also that the kavanah mitis, the true kavanah, the true purpose in this learning is to unite down below. Again, this is something we learned a few chapters back, that the purpose is, in other words, not necessarily to refine the world, it's to reveal God in the world. And Kuchabricha can be in a revealed level split, because Zohar Malchus, and through this learning, like it says in Tanya, end of chapter 10. And here the purpose is not simply to quench the thirst of their souls alone, to cleave, to connect to God alone, and to quench the thirst of their soul, because that's for their soul. That's what he says there. Like the Tanya explains from Tikkun Zeir, who's a chassid? The one who does kindness in kene, with his nest, or with kene is God, in other words. His kan is with nest, but kene, and the Nidres L'Shamish is kene. Kene meaning my nest, my source, my creator. So what he says in Tanya, he's just adding the parentheses that in the illuminate itself, there's doing it for refining your body, for strengthening your soul. Then there's doing it l'shma, which is also repairs the world, like he says, and also it's not in order to satisfy or to quench your desire, quench your thirst, but it's only doing it l'chassid and kene, for God. So it's like he doesn't really care about the world, he cares that God should be reconnected with Tachtein, in Tachtein. So that's the parentheses. It's just qualifying, because since he's already talking about Torah, that the neshama has to work with the body, and so on. So he's saying, but there's sometimes you do it in a way, directly, either through prayer or through Torah, and there in the parentheses he's adding even those that do it, because you could say, maybe that's the problem. Those that are learning Torah L'Shma, they're not thinking about the Guf and Nefesh Abamah. So again, we have an air without a keli. He says, no. Even that also affects the containers. But instead of doing it directly, that you're doing it in order to affect the containers, by learning for the cause itself, the Shema, it affects it indirectly, or affects it anyway, because it is ultimately affecting the universe. So that's what he's adding here. Because as I said, you could argue that tzaddik, the person who is doing it l'shma, you could say he's not doing it adaited the nafsh, he's not doing it for the purpose of refining his body and animal soul or natural soul, then it's not the kavanah. So he says no, it always affects that in the healthy situation, the healthy balance. The unhealthy one is where it's compartmentalized. But the healthy one, even l'shma, also affects, whether it's, like you said, kula t'nui ben azikin, or the kavanah, like it says, and also this kavanah is to be to unite the God and the Shekhinah in the lower worlds, and not just for himself. So it's just a distinction of how this refinement of the body takes place. Okay, so that was through Torah Tefillah. Ayin Beis Torah mitzvos at the bottom of the previous page. He's saying Ayin Beis Torah mitzvos, and now he's continuing another way that this takes place. And the same through doing mitzvahs, the fulfillment of the good deeds. of the mitzvahs of the Torah is in order to connect, to bind the natural soul to the divine, to Elokus, to godliness. So we have Tefillah does it with the preparation of Torah. There's Torah that does it. There's Torah Lishma that does it in its way. And now mitzvahs, obviously, because mitzvahs are with physical things. And this is the level of the Beinanim. He's referring now to Tanya. There's a lot of Tanya here, I see. These chapters 10, 11, 12. This is the level of Beinanim. The Betzadikim inyan kiyama mitzvahs l'sakna roza d'shmei. And again, he's being elaborate because he's talking about all the scenarios. He wants to make sure to emphasize that even those that are tzaddikim are also refining the material world and the guf and nefesh, and they're not compartmentalizing. In other words, this imbalance he spoke before is not the tzaddikim's way. It's not a healthy way just to compartmentalize. So he's explaining it in all levels. So yeah, but Beinanim, you do a mitzvah in order to actually refine and bind the natural soul to the divine. And tzaddikim, their kima mitzvahs, like he just said in the parentheses about Torah Lishma, is l'sakna roza d'shmei. Their purpose in mitzvahs, you could say by them, they've already refined their bodies. Their purpose in mitzvahs, l'sakna roza d'shmei, means to repair the secret of the name. What does this mean? The hainu, which means l'hesif edes b'atzilus, u'kamesh kosev b'makamach. It means to add new energies, new emanations, new illuminations and revelations in Atzilus. So Atzilus itself has its measure of divine energy, and through their mitzvahs l'sakna roza d'shmei, they're actually doing it more on a spiritual level. They're repairing the secret of the name. Roza d'shmei means they're revealing more elokus. So when we do a mitzvah, beinani, you're doing it, you're actually refining. Let's say the body should eat kosher, make a blessing, give tzedakah, behave like a mensch. All the mitzvahs is a mitzvah. It's aligning that you shouldn't just follow your own natural habits and selfish routines, but you should align it. That's what a mitzvah does. But what's by a tzaddik who's already there in that place? So it's l'sakna roza d'shmei. It's in order to bring more divine into the world. So you could again argue this is only not keli. He doesn't. I don't know if he concludes, but the fact that, however, that also affects the world, like he said about Torah Lishma. But regardless, Avedis Habenim, which is the majority of people, the work of the Beinani, like he says in Tanya, that a Beinani is what is the midas kol adam, achrei kol adam yimshech, that this is the natural, this is the place that every human being can reach, where you have a divine soul and an animal soul, and there's a battle. However, you're in control. So he says, in Avedis Habenim, where they do deal with an animal soul, Avedis Habenim became a mitzvah for the kashrus and nefesh abamis. The work of Beinim in fulfilling mitzvahs, there it is to bind the animal soul. It's interesting, again, he keeps interchanging the word nefesh hativis and nefesh abamis. 3 lines before, he said l'kasha nefesh hativis l'lukus, the natural soul. Now he says nefesh abamis. I would assume here there's no real distinction, even though you can break it down, but they're both basically nefesh hativis, nefesh abamis are interchangeable. Well, the mitzvahs, Yeshlam Zgula Pratis Lakashas and Nefesh Hativis. Now back to Nefesh Hativis. As it's known, the mitzvahs have a particular Zgula, a particular power, a particular ability, particular feature, skill, Zgula. Zgula sometimes means almost like a charm, a particular Zgula. But they have a particular Zgula, a detailed ability to bind the natural soul. Like it says in Torah, in the discourse that begins, who is like God that lifts me? Okay, so first of all, every mitzvah the mitzvahs have a specific ability to bind the natural soul, And then there's also the Aveda Pradz B'chol Mitzvah. Every mitzvah has its particular work. Kamei Tefillin. What is Tefillin? The Shabbat Alev HaMeich, to bind the heart and the mind. Kamei Shekoseh B'Sefer Shalbein in Perek Namalav, like it says in Tanya, chapter 41. So we're seeing how mitzvahs, he's showing how mitzvahs actually immerse themselves, involve themselves, engage with the body and the natural soul. Like an esrig, which is the citron, one of the four daled minim, the four species we bring on Sukkot. So it's a Rosh Tevis, al teviyenu regel gaiva. Don't bring me to the legs of arrogance, etc. So esrig has an element of humbling a person. And similar, b'chol mitzvah, in every mitzvah. So every mitzvah has a particular role in sublimating, in refining the part of the body or part of the natural soul of the human being. And the reward of this work in mitzvahs, this is when we say the word mitzvahs, my mitzvahs. So here again, in the parentheses, going to the schar. It's already the third time. It's interesting. We talked about the schar, the reward. So he talked about the reward of the soul of its own through the work. Misha Torah, the one who works Erev Shabbos, is the one that eats on Shabbos. He talked about the reward of Torah Lishma. Which is the reward. In other words, it's the reward of the soul, not the work of the soul. The work of the soul has to affect the body and the natural soul. We're on page 614 right now. And now we speak in the Schar of Vedas HaMitzvahs who in mitzvahs. Kidua sheyesh mitzvahs Hashem and mitzvahs. There are two levels. There's mitzvahs Hashem. Sometimes it says God's mitzvahs. Sometimes it says my mitzvahs. Oish is the inyan avodehem, like we said before. Or this is the inyan of avodehem, but they're my servants. Kamashikosav kalibnei Yisrael avodehem. Same like mitzvah sai. So sometimes you say mitzvahs Hashem in the third person. Sometimes you say it's God, my mitzvahs. Like Avodeh, my servants. Kili, the children of Israel are my servants. Avodehem. The in Avodeh ubchins yirei law, k'may Moshe Avdi. You say Avodah, you're talking about is a higher level of awe. Is yirei law yirei tata. Yirei tata usually is yirei tata refers to fear of things that relate to you, fear of punishment or a fear of not being close to God. Yirei law, on the other hand, is the awe of the divine presence. It's similar to Teshuvah law and Teshuvah tata. Teshuvah tata is repairing negative stuff. Teshuvah law is experiencing the kush for its own benefits. So Yirei law is what he's calling is this level of mitzvahs, mitzvah say, avodai, v'komei Moshe avdi, Moshe my servant. Mashakasu kalibnei Yisrael avodim b'chinas yirei tata. It says to libnei Yisrael, the children of Israel are my servants. Is the level of yirei tata. Avodai zeh b'chinas yirei law. So in other words, the verse says twice, avodehem, v'lo avodim lavodim. We say avodehem. That's one expression. Then it says kalibnei Yisrael avodim. What's the difference between avodehem and when kilibnei Yisrael avodim? It's like you see, avodah meaning is closer to God. It says my servants. Kilibnei Yisrael is also mine, but it's already like a step away. Kili, to me, similar to mitzvahs Hashem. That's how he's explaining it. So he says kilibnei Yisrael is yirei tata. It's very condensed here, so it doesn't elaborate. It's elaborated in other places, but it's the parentheses. He just wants to qualify and speak about again that mitzvahs, even though their purpose is refining the material world, refining the body and the natural soul, but the schar mitzvah, the reward for it, is reaching a higher level in the divine. See, the whole point here in this whole chapter, what he's doing is very avoided. He's explaining, we spoke about the dysfunctional type where the soul separates from the body, or compartmentalizes is the better word, which is not good for the soul. It's not the right kavanah. What is the kavanah? The soul has to engage with the body. The whole reason the soul comes down is to engage. But we do have dimensions in Aveda where you don't see that engagement, where what we're calling reward, where it's more the reward is to connect to God. So you could say connecting to God, that's back to the earth. Where's the keli? So that's why he's qualifying it, that the work has to be with the containers, with the guf and nefesh ativus. Ma has to work with ban as a union. But in this parentheses, adding that the reward is, yes, the reward is going to a greater place. The reward for it is you reach mitzvah side, that you're doing the mitzvah because it's God's mitzvah, not because you want to refine. Like he said, the Beinanim refine their nature, the natural soul with their mitzvahs. A tzaddik is lasakan rosh d'shmei. He does it to add energy, not silas. But both of them have to affect the material world. But in the higher level mitzvahs, it's qualifying is something that's more connected, meaning more connected to God, Yiri Allah. But there's also Yiri Tata. I remember the pasuk says Kli b'nei Yisrael avodim. Avodahem is not in the pasuk. Avodahem is already the Maimer Chazal on the pasuk, right? Because it talks in Parsha Bahar. It says, release the slaves, release the servants in Shemitah or Yeva. Oh, it does say Avodahem. Okay, Kli b'nei Yisrael avodim, and then it says Avodahem. So what's the redundancy? So he's explaining Kli b'nei Yisrael avodim is first the lower level. They're my servants. In other words, in refining the world. And then Avodahem, they reach a level of Yiri Allah. Okay. Back to outside of the parentheses. So this is now, remember he started, this is a long hain, just to show you the flow here. How the Alter Rebbe Rashab is, it's a whole long hain. Bottom of page 613 he started, that how do you do this avodah of refining the body and the natural soul? Ayin Beis mitzvos. Ayin always means both in this, and now he's going to the second half of the both, the second Ayin. So the first Ayin was a long Ayin that went with half a page that talks about Torah and mitzvos, summing up either the work Torah and mitzvos which strengthens the soul, the divine soul, weakens the animal soul. And this, he said, could be either through Torah alone, or through our Torah helps and prepares for prayer. The two different types of souls, whose either primary service is prayer or study, or through mitzvahs, and chen became a mitzvahs, and through mitzvahs. And now he's going back to another behain. Behain ba'aveda bizbonus aliki. See the behain here is another second behain. Behain, and another, both in other words, so if we read it straight, we read Hein be'esik hatera mitzvahs, through Torah and mitzvahs, which you just covered. The Hein ba'aveda bizbonus aliki, in the work of divine contemplation, contemplating and something and meditating. Actually, contemplating is what I usually use by bonus. Yeah. Yeah. That when he's meditating or contemplating on a divine thing, it should have a connection to the guf, the body, and the natural soul. So the first Hain is both through Torah and mitzvahs, as I said, and including tefillah, that they all are connected to the body and the nefesh ativus and the natural soul. The Hain, that also when he's meditating, contemplating on a divine thing, it should have a connection to the body. So no matter which one you're doing, even when the soul has to relate to the body. That's the purpose of its.
So the subject matter of the meditation should be something that's connected to the body.
Right.
It should be a physical.
Yeah. He explained this earlier.
Not in
the previous minor.
In the upper spheres, but it should be something that's connected to
there
the physical.
He gives, as explanation given is in the previous minor, in this chapter. Reish Sadik Zayin 293-7 is very much connected to this. Because there he spoke the Avodah from Tehu, and Avodah the whole thing of this imbalances. It's interesting to compare, but there he used the example of compartmentalization on dysfunctional number 2, type number 2. Here is using it more in type number 1. Okay, and there's a comparison between the two, but we won't go there right now. Let's continue here. But there he explained how these bonus in Aliki, you actually bring it to the body, because there's ways you can think about things that don't have different. He gives examples there of how you engage. You have to find things that the nefesh habahamis is involved in, right?
Yeah.
V'hainu, he goes on, which means the second type, the hain, the second element, shelo yispal b'nafshe b'yeser b'hergesh ein Aliki. They should not excessively become emotional, become excited. We speak about what the spol is. Become spol here means definitely more than just affected. It means excited. It means aroused. It means stimulated. You shouldn't be excessively stimulated. Maybe that's the right. In the soul, in feeling and sensing this divine thing, should be his bonus. Because in a meditation or contemplation, it comes into an excessive, an excessive stimulation or excessive inspiration or excessive excitement, in a way that's abstract from the natural abilities. In other words, I didn't read it right. What has to be, on the contrary, lahashkit, his palace and nefesh, to quiet down, to silence, or to weaken, not to silence, to quiet down, lahashkit, like shh, lahashkit, the excitement of the soul, the stimulation, calm it down, maybe. Quiet down, calm it down. Well, latzer, bad keches nefesh, and to stop, and to slow down, to restrain. Ba'ad keches nefesh, on behalf of the keches nefesh. It's interesting. He doesn't say latzer keches nefesh. He says ba'ad, to restrain on behalf of the faculties.
Ba'ad means before here.
Ba'ad, before, not ba'ad. Ba'ad is not before. Ba'ad means on behalf of. Ba'ad.
Yeah.
In other words, you have to, the keches are full speed ahead, and you have to impose upon them a restraint to slow them down. The brakes. You can't just have the gas, basically. That they shouldn't be so excited, they shouldn't be so stimulated. There should be more of an internal feeling. Remember, we spoke about something that becomes very loud and boisterous and very excited. On one hand, it looks powerful, but it could also mean something that's very makif, and very external. It reminds me, reminiscent of what he said before about the feeling. If you remember the example he gave for the third level of dysfunctionality, he spoke about the noise, the rash by Matan Torah, that there was a lot of noise. So I'm just thinking, maybe we always talk about why was that so relevant? It was more relevant that the Erev Rav took advantage of the moment and built a golden calf in their yeshes. But he said the Ayin Hora was shalta because of the noise of the Matan Torah, the rash, the fireworks, the fanfare. So it's similar, this type of when things are all excited, there can be trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why Yom Kippur has to be quiet. I'm just mentioning it. I'm not sure that's the same thing, but it reminds us.
That's what it says when you get lost, like berash, like because basically it means that it's more internalized. It's
like divrei chacham benachas nishman. Even when they have a strong position, it's eris and kalim basically. In general they say a puske macht is not tumult. When you have an empty container, you put a coin in it, it makes a lot of noise. With a lot of coins, it doesn't make so much noise.
Or when you start a bonfire, it could flare.
Well, in general, whenever you see too much excitement,
it goes right out. It's not
quickly, you have to be wary, because the whole point is Ratzei and a Shuv. So bottom line is, he's talking now how this bonus should not be in this fashion. So it has to be. And that is, it should be more settled, more internalized, more contained. Then the meditation or the contemplation is anochateva. It settles properly. It internalized properly, integrated properly. And it's with an internal feeling. And then it's also felt in the natural faculties. I mean, it's really practical. Think about it. Let's say you're standing by Matan Torah, or you're having some spiritual inspiration. And your soul is so ablaze and excited. The excitement overwhelms. Let's say your children are there. You say, what are you so excited about? You almost can't tell them because you've become so consumed with your excitement. Whereas if it's a little calmer, you're able to internalize it, you're able to share it. And the things around you also are influenced by it. It's not just your fire that's burning. It's not like a tzaddik in pelts that he just warms himself or gets excited. Which, as we said earlier, in general, is that excitement is questionable how long it's going to last. But it's definitely not impacting the natural keiches, the natural faculties. It's overwhelming them. It's like, oh.
It's like slow and steady versus, with very strong.
Well, the Friedrich Rebbe once told the American Chapacha that there's Americans and Russians are like logs and straw.
Yeah.
Straw ignites quickly and burns out quickly. Logs take a while to ignite. But once they're burning, they burn for a long time. Okay, so first step was that the actual meditation, actual contemplation, should not be one of excessive excitement, excessive stimulation. It should be more relaxed, not more subdued, but internalized. So not talking about weakening the intensity. We're talking about internalizing it. But also weakening, because in Tayu, there's a lot of excitement. There's too much excitement. It's like overstimulation. And now he's saying, B'chlal zeh, this goes back to that chapter of Zayin that I said. B'chlal zeh, this also includes what you had said before. So the first step was really more that the nefesh l'kish should not be too stimulated, excessively. Now the izbanos should be in things that are related to the natural soul. V'hainu, which means
that's right.
Right. To talk about the reflection of the divine, the divine light, the divine reflection that manifests in a manifest way in the worlds. Like, for example, when the Rambam says, how do you come to love and awe of God? By being mizbein, by meditating, contemplating on nature. By looking at the greatness of the world, the Ma'arabah Masecha, the multitude, Ma'agad Masecha, the quality. You study the design of the universe. The Psukkah de Zimra, which prepares us for Shema, that's what you focus on. You praise God. You say in benching for giving us sustenance. So when you meditate on the world and its beauty, and its organization, and its gifts of life, and so on. I'm just giving examples. So if you're meditating on Atzilus or Lifnei Tzimtzum, that's Nefesh Elokis department. There it can be beyond. The natural soul will say, hey, that's beyond me. But when you show it how in its things that are related to it, and it has a spice, because even the animal soul looks at a scene in nature, sees a beautiful thing. It also is influenced by it. So he's saying that this bonus has to be in such matters. So now he spoke firstly about not over excessive stimulation. Now he spoke about things that are related to the natural soul. And now he's saying the way you should contemplate. Also the method of contemplation. That you should, the contemplation, the meditation should be in true understanding, mamish understanding, with the garments of intelligence. In order that also the natural soul, the natural seichel of the natural soul, should also understand it. So in other words, it's not just in matters you can think about, for example, nature, but there's also a way of doing it where what's the word? You apply yourself. So it'll be like a teacher teaching the student on the student's terms. I want you to understand and appreciate this divine element. I explained before, 1 second. If I recall, it's Reish Tzadik Zayin. No, this is Reish Tzadik Ches, my mistake. Reish Tzadik Ches, 298, that's what I saw.
So it's bonus lefi erech hanefesh b'hamis. That's what it talks about over there. That his bonus is lefi erech hanefesh b'hamis.
Yeah. Oh, I was referring to chapter 297, this thing that he said before about liyachda. Do we do it for the nefesh al-guf nefesh b'hamis? If you look on page 601, so he speaks about that the real bittul came to the mitzvahs leibishvil adavet nafshi, just for himself. But in order to
298, he says, "As bonus leitiek me'asagis and shalom tzelatzmei."
Yeah, no, I was talking about something else. I was talking a few lines earlier. We talked about Tanya Perik Yud. He says that you shouldn't do it just to quench the thirst of your soul, but to connect to God. That's connected to the higher purpose. That's all I wanted to connect to. That's the Reish Tzadik. But Reish Tzadik is correct. So 298 talks about how you have to apply these bonus also into the natural soul, nefesh atzivus and seichel. Now in parentheses he adds, ukasher his bonus uboif gizeh, when the contemplation, meditation is in this manner, which what manner? That it engages and it relates to the natural soul. Zeh gufa matzur namashkit isparas nefesh b'tzadatzmei. He's now connecting it to the first thing. That itself restrains and what did we say? Quiets down. You said calms down the excitement, the stimulation of the soul on its own. Because the spilus, the excitement, the stimulation of the soul on its own is of course more so in the higher dimensions of elikus, of godliness. So and when they're not that manifest in the garments of understanding. However, when you begin to contemplate in a way that also relates to nefesh ativis, I'm sorry. No. The nigun is not right. But the way that we spoke earlier in chapter 301, talked the imbalance, previous chapter. When the soul has no connection to the body, generally speaking, that means it's not really understood properly. It's not with a complete hasaga, contemplation. Levad ben neshamas gevei should be the dust of the mata and commission the mile mamish. In other parentheses, within the parentheses, except for great neshamas, that when they come below, they're just as they are above. The kumoy neshamas shenifka leim hapargu gebo lamata commission the mile. Talking about another level of souls that pierce through the curtain, the veil that's separated, and they came below the way they are above. So generally, when the neshama comes down, it goes through veils and concealments and parsoyas and pargud till it gets here. But there are souls, he's referring to obviously certain madrega, because pargud is not usual language, that just pierce through and they are below as they are above. Usually Moshe is like a person like this, but he's not using Moshe because I think Moshe spoke about the Avodah. Anyway, in that state where he's disconnected from the body and has no connection, he's excited and stimulated from the general divine matter here, godliness. But the Amitis Aveda now the true Aveda, this Aveda of the soul connecting to the divine, is the reward of the neshamas, like you said before about Shabbos, to have pleasure with godliness. Pleasure with godliness. Okay, so 1 second, let's just get this right. Okay, so he's saying like this, he didn't conclude, he just went like this. And initially he said that in order for the proper balance is that the divine soul should not be overstimulated and overexcited. It has to be quieted down, has to be tamed, has to be, what would you say, restrained, and we keep using the word calmed. Second thing, it has to contemplate in ways that relate to the soul, to the body, I'm sorry, and the nature, and in ways that are completely understood by the nature, right, by the natural soul. In this parenthesis, he adds that it's interdependent. When the soul engages the body, that itself weakens and tames and calms and restrains the intensity of the soul, because the soul is, because the greatest excitement of the soul is when it's involved in things that are not connected to below, when it goes into those higher worlds, and also doesn't necessarily fully understand them. It's more a general sense of it. It's very abstract. And except for those the souls, we're not talking about the souls, the special souls that are below as they are above. Now the Amitis Aveda now needs a little explanation.
Right.
I already explained it earlier. I think he's saying two things here. Amitis Aveda now, my assumption is that he's talking about the Aveda now, not the Aveda of engaging with the body.
Right.
The mitzvah of connecting to God. You see, the Rebbe Rashab doesn't want to compromise the soul's connection either. Even when the divine soul is engaging with the body and nefesh hativis, the goal is not that it should lose its feature, its personalities, its personality of being ayin. It's just that the ayin should be commensurate with the yesh. It's still flame, it's still fire. So that's why I think he's struggling back and forth in finding that right place, because you do find the soul has the element of having pleasure with God that the body will never appreciate. And that's also healthy. So he's distinguishing, I think he's distinguishing, he says it already, if you look at the parentheses, Lasanig Alavai is the bottom of last page. The parentheses, look at that parentheses. What he's trying to say is that when the neshama works with the body, first of all, it doesn't compromise its connection to God, because on the contrary, it makes it deeper, as we spoke. But even that element that it will relate to the Sanig al Hashem, which is the pleasure it has in God itself, like something the body does not have. Or like he said before about mitzvos, mitzvos, or he spoke about the Yachdash Kutchabricha, that he's doing it for the higher purpose. This too, when it's done properly with the body, will not be compromised. So what he's saying here, that the true avodah of really, you want to really connect to God, that's not by becoming over excessively excited and forgetting about the body. You have to work with the body. And the real amitis hakam, that's what he's concluding here. And amitis avodah hanal, this real avodah of the soul's connection, he is chad and the shamas lisanag lavai. That's the reward that the shamas get when they work with the body. Instead of, in other words, doing it on their own, because I'm so excited, it's because they work that, so that's in a sense their reward that they get as a result of it. So that's a key difference.
But it's not the Aveda. That's
right.
Not
in other words, if you're working for the schar, and you're just working toward that, you're going to forget about what the purpose of the neshama is. So there's the distinction of between why the soul descends in the body, and what comes out of it. And the soul should get too excited and say, you know what, I want to right away have what comes out of it.
That's not
but that working, that's not the way. Then it's jumped the gun, so to speak. That's what appears like hanal. Or you could say amitis aveda hanal could also be, in general, the amitis aveda of the soul with the body. No, amitis aveda no. Amitis aveda no. So in other words, the soul will end up contemplating on higher levels of the divine, but only afterwards. If it doesn't now, then it's more of a selfish. It wants what it wants. It's like we said earlier, just to get out of here. I want to do what I want to do. In other words, have now patience and restraint and do what you have to do, and then you'll have the ultimate of both worlds. Good. Now back out of the parentheses. The chen being Teshuvah. Now a third thing. So he spoke about hein Torah mitzvos. Now he spoke about these bonus that it all has to be. He's speaking in a way that all these elements how Er and Keli meet. And now the chen being Teshuvah. Remember, Teshuvah was essentially the theme of the previous chapter. So now he's also bringing in Teshuvah. Because Teshuvah, you could say, that's fascinating because he's saying three things. One, Torah mitzvos and tefillah, which is really Torah v'edim milas chasadim. Then he spoke his bonus, the idea of contemplation. Because you could say, you know what, Torah, tefillah, mitzvahs, okay, that's to refine the world. But now that my soul is contemplating on God, I want to contemplate on God, on my level. No, that too has to be connected. He's showing how Er and Keli have to meet everywhere. Hama ban, how the soul and body have to meet. Now he's saying Teshuvah. Because Teshuvah, you could argue, okay, Torah mitzvahs, tefillah. His bonus is fine. But Teshuvah, now I've already been in a place that was a terrible place. Let me now, completely right, go out of myself and go right into God. Teshuvah rather was run away, like he said, out of Teshuvah. I want to run away from this place. So, even that has to always be with the nefesh, right? So it's fascinating. No matter, there's no such thing as just, right. It's just doing whatever you want. The chebi in Teshuvah, and also in Teshuvah, so he shows the three sections here. Okay. What is Teshuvah? That when he feels haloitev, how the negativity, how not unpleasant. It says haloitev, the bad, the inappropriateness, whatever. Merichukim elakus, from his distance from godliness. And it should be a feeling that's internal. That's all the Teshuvah. And he should be very distressed. See, tzar is now back to without ayin. Tzar more for constrained. Very constrained from this, very distressed. Even though, that's what the passage is, and if, I have to see how it concludes. And this creates in him a expiration of his soul, meaning his soul is like expires, leaves. In a level of leaving, exiting from the parameters of container.
Conservation.
Right. This is not a comfort. Like you said, that he cannot be at peace. And this is not at peace with the soul. Okay, speak in two different ways. I'm sorry. I have to reword this. The problem I'm having here is exactly how the wording goes. I mean, we know what he wants to say, that it has to engage the body, but I'm not sure how it fits in the words exactly. Let's go over again. And two ways. It could be that causes his soul to expire and to leave the container. So that's not that it calmed him down and brought him peace. It's only the intensity of his yearning and his hunger, thirst for godliness. Or another way, or it's in a way of running, that he runs away from the evil. And he's drawn excessively, with a strong draw, strong pull, to the divine. Okay. I see. He's speaking in the positive. He's saying Teshuvah the way it should be. He already said what it shouldn't be. The way Teshuvah the wrong way, you'll understand what he said earlier, is where all you sense it's not good for me, I want out of here. You have no strategy, there's no cheshbon, there's no accounting, not in the negative what to do about repairing it, not in the positive that you can elevate this world and all the benefits that come from the descent. So he's not speaking positive. That also Teshuvah, I was overthinking it because I was thinking that he's bavoning like the negative. So he's saying Teshuvah. What is Teshuvah? The way it should be. He feels the leitev, how bad it is, the distance from the divine. He feels how far it is. And this is internal. And he's very disturbed by it. And however that disturbance applies, he's saying two ways how that impacts him. This sensation, this pain, this internal sense of distance. It could be that it causes his soul to want to leave the container. And the reason for that is not because leaving. Remember, if you remember in the previous chapter, he said that why does the soul want to leave? Not because it wants to, God forbid, throw everything away, because it's so desperate. It just wants to get out of here. It wants to, wants to get out of here. It's not, it thinks that's where it'll find its peace. He said that it really doesn't find peace that way, because it just wants to get out of here. So that's what he's saying here in a good way, that it's not about finding peace by getting out of here. It's simply because the distance from God awakened in him the intensity, like we said about the dam. This is all healthy. Okay, he's what he's doing here. He's giving the counter force to what he said in that chapter. Let me explain. That's why I was Nechem Nafshe. Nechem Nafshe in that previous chapter was speaking about that, so to speak, the soul, the divine soul, is not at peace here.
Because it's not interested.
And just wants to get out of here. Yeah. And he says there, it's not really because it wants peace. It just can't stand being here. So it's not up with a goal. So that's what he's saying here. In a healthy teshuvah, what should happen is, instead of when you see the distance from God, instead of the dysfunctional reaction would be, I want to get out of here, and instead of repairing and working, here, this sensation of you feeling distance, so no, remember we said about the dam, it's a resistance to do something. So what does it do? It should cause you to have very koloim b'nafshe. You want to leave, not because you're just desperate and want to get out of here, and so to speak, have peace. It's not like you want to retire and have peace, but it causes an intensity of ratzeh, of yearning, and samoin, and thirst to godliness. That's one thing that so-called the sense of distance from God you feel down below, in a good way, healthy way. Or the opposite. This is more, he felt senses of distance. Maybe these are the two things in the Teshuvah that in the previous chapter. The first thing, he senses the distance, therefore it causes him to have a deeper, more intense yearning and thirst. Or, because he senses distance, he runs away from the evil. This is a little different, because here he's talking about running from the evil. There it's more the pain of the distance. Here he's running more from the evil, like the sur mara. I think it's the two types of teshuvah that he spoke in the previous chapter. And he's drawn with a very strong pull. Drawn. See is like draw a pull to godliness. But because of this, specifically, explicitly because of this sensation, because now he feels this intensity, a very strong decision and resolution is made in his soul, in himself. Mitzvos. That's real truth. Not just the desperation, I'm out of here, I'm out of this place, but it causes to have a strong resolution in his nefesh to fulfill mitzvos, to work in Torah, and to follow the ways of God. And that is what brings peace to his soul. So it's not bringing peace that he's leaving. The leaving is because he's hungry and thirsty, not because he deludes himself into thinking he's going to find peace. This is peace. In the parentheses he adds. And then, and also, what he feels distressed below. There's also a form of teshuvah like that. Like it says elsewhere, No, Botzalehem means that he designated for them, right?
No, Batzala,
Well, Bitzad is
when they were distressed.
what is the
Where
first one? Where we say Bitzad?
we say them in davening. Batzala, Memtzikasei Metzilim, Medachim Tachanot, Tilim.
He's just saying in the parentheses
And Haidul Hashem.
that also tzad itself is also part of it. No, Teshuvah is not just the heskem chazak. Teshuvah is not just the resolution you make, the strong resolution, but also the mere fact that you feel distressed is such a form of Teshuvah, like it says, "B'tzad lehem shalom zamokim tzad," that this material world is a narrow place, a constrained place, a distressed place. Kol magmose v'chefse, his entire objective and desire, hulaharchiv v'kemi lamata, is to expand his space here below, dafke, lamata dafke, specifically below. V'kamoi harchivi mokim alech pamshachas eden sof lamata. Like it says, harchivi mokim alech, that I will, harchivi mokim aholech, that I will, harchivi, expand for me my space, so I should walk in. In other words, it's like broaden the path of my path.
Tense. Ahalech is a tense.
Huh?
Ahalech is a tense.
Intense.
No, the tense.
Place, dwelling place. Torah.
Oh, really? Alecha. I thought it meant ahalech in my going. You sure?
Not.
Maybe,
Now that
okay.
you mentioned it.
Achivi mokim alecha. Alech. Achivi mokim alech, which means expand for me the space of my dwelling, in other words. Okay. B'amshachas einin sof lamata, in the drawing down of the divine infinite light below, through the work of Torah. Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Why was it translated literally?
That they cried out to Hashem when they were in anguish.
Mm-hmm. Good. And okay, so he says achiv to expand the space. The esek Torah through the work in Torah.
I'll show you where it is.
Yeah.
It's enough Torah of.
Ubezeh yarchiv lehamokim. Achiv mokim. Yarchiv lehamokim. Hamokim is not referring to God.
No, they're it's a ruchnius.
Above the Shas, a little above the Shulchan Aruch actually. And with this, the space gets expanded. And he finds spiritual pleasure in this.
Which chapter?
That is Aleph, okay. Rani Vakori, yeah. So literally means hachivi. Expand the place of my dwelling. Yeah. Okay, it's in the Yeshaya, chapter 54. So, okay, so it expands. So he just added in the parentheses that the Teshuvah is also not just in the decision to do Torah mitzvos and follow the right ways, but also the fact itself that he's distressed is itself a form of Teshuvah. That causes him to have a desire to broaden, expand the space. He wants to get out of this narrow, little, constrained space. After the parentheses, and all this, everything we discussed here, is because this comes from the neshama. Comes from the neshama.
Yeah, that's what he said about the
neshama, that it should have a connection, a relationship with the body. And the same thing from the other side. Just like the neshama has to apply itself and engage the body and the natural soul, also the body and the natural soul should have to be a container between this keli. That the body and the natural soul has to be a container to the soul's
to be naturally receptive to the soul.
To be a container to the earth. See, keli and earth, it keeps using container to the earth, to the soul's
receptive.
Yeah. As we discussed at length earlier, and that means that it should be in a level of bitl hayesh, somewhat of sublimating its identity, its yesh, its ego. There's a yi keli ala neshama. through that, it becomes a container to receive the neshama. Okay, so step one, it should be a container. That's repairing dysfunctional type 1. There are 4 blood types. So 4 dysfunctional types. And then the other extreme, and it shouldn't be an excessive bittul, an excessive sublimation. Because then it's not going to be, it's not a container. It's not in the level of a container, as if it doesn't exist. Or canal, as we explained earlier, Perek Shinal from the previous chapter, chapter 301. Like explain, what does that mean? That just like the neshama, very interesting.
Shouldn't be the porous.
The neshama, right? The neshama, when it's on its own, it does what it wants. I want to get out of here. I want divine. It doesn't consider that there's a partner that it has here that it has to invite in, which is the body. The body can also do the same thing. A person's weak personality. Okay, I'm overly, excessively overwhelmed by the divine. And that's it. I'm porous. I'm almost not there, like you said, the container. He says, no. That's if it comes on your own. He's now showing how you repair that. Remember I spoke about how do you repair that element of a person? How do you broaden your containers, in other words? So he's saying now like this. The way a container, let's say that's a soft container, or a weak one, a weak lev nishbar, as we said, natural person, low self-esteem, that the bittul should need not be because of the body on its own.
Yeah. So
that is right. So that's how the body is on its natural, its essential nature. Is rachakana, it's weak. Ki'im, masha neshama poyel boy, a bittul, ve'esi lekli. The avodah here is that the neshama should affect and cause this sublimation and turning him into a container. But remember, we talked the interface. It has to be perfect. It can't just be mitzad neshama imposing itself.
Then it will
you have
lose
to
its identity.
Right. You have to have the body be a container. So he says, beginning it starts from mitzad haguf, starts from the body. It's generated. It begins the process is initiated by the body. That it should be a level of, that it is a container. It shouldn't be an excessive yesh, an excessive I, an excessive ego. In a very coarse, crass way. Rather, it should be in a level of bitl hayesh. So the body on its own has to have a form of receptivity, a form of bitl hayesh, not excessive, based on its nature. When it has that receptivity, like you spoke earlier. In other words, remember you spoke about the whole thing, that certain things, remember the two iskalos. One iskalos that comes from Eir and Keli on their own, that they're receptive to each other, which is very critical, that they accept they're going to sit in the same room, even though they're two different worlds, Ayin Beis. So they've weakened, they now tolerate each other. And the Eir is beginning to recognize the container is recognizing the Eir. Then comes level 2 is when they join, and then they machlif, as you said, machlif, not just tivam,
they exchange properties.
They machlif pulei. The first thing is that they break their nature. Their nature is this one wants to go to Ayin, this one wants to go to Yesh. So the first thing is they have to weaken that nature. Yeah. That they have to do on their own, that they have on their own. Then comes where they join, and now they get things that they don't have on their own. A bittul, the keli gets a bittul b'mitzvos that it does not have on its own. A real bittul that will last, and it's a container. Yeah. That's the twist here. That this weak personality, when he submits to the Eir will make him a stronger keli, because the Eir is also appropriate. And the opposite, the Eir will get something that it couldn't have on its own, which is the kavon el yena that it senses in the keli that it doesn't have on its own. So it senses something before that's why it descends, but it doesn't have the full. And the second dimension that they get, that's something that's not on their own. That's where they give each other. So you have the perfect interface. They're both identities. They have they retain their natural elements, but they've weakened it a bit because of bittul and ma. Basically, into the pot, you throw in the ingredients of bittul, that weakens it. And then when they join, they can give each other things, and they really can complement each other, and that becomes a true fusion. I mean, it's beautiful, the formula, how the Halavai would work so easily.
God implanted it into the Keli and into the edge to be able to...
They both have the sense of it, but they could also easily...
Where does that come from, that they both have a sense?
The Kavanah Yen, he said that. But the Kavanah Yen is concealed and gives them the choice, because they could also go the other way. They don't have to do that. What happens is, unfortunately, like you said, the examples, you could go the other direction, where Aaron and Keli do not meet, the 4 different ways. So basically, that's what he's saying here. So the first step is that bitl hayesh, creating the clay reikon, that you become an empty vessel, you're receptive. And then the neshama affects it, and neshama poel behabitl. Then the neshama causes it the bitl, and turns it into even more of a container. You see, the beauty here is that, like we said before, when they help each other, it's not just they're helping each other, they're helping themselves. When the neshama on its own thinks it's going to just leave this place, it's not just that it's ignoring the body and not fulfilling the kavanah. The neshama will not fulfill its purpose. Like you said, it's an illusion. The neshama will not get where it has to get because there's no mavukish. It doesn't have a goal. When the neshama realizes that down below the resistance is causing me to bring out my intensity, so then the Keli is bringing the neshama to a greater place. Besides the fact that it's fulfilling the purpose, and the Keli is the same thing the other way around. When the Keli does its purpose of is receptive to the air makes the Keli a better Keli. So this weak personality, through healthy bittul, if he just has bittul, natural bittul from the body that he's a leiv nishbar, will not be a container. Because he's sublimating himself and is receptive, the neshama is going to help him be a real container. It's fascinating. The bittul will make him a stronger person. In other words, the ayin is going to make the keli a stronger yesh in a healthy way. Yeah. But that's only when they both are there to help each other. Because the ayin won't do that if the ayin is selfish into its own things. Because then the ayin will take advantage of someone that's so porous, they'll abuse them. It'll be, okay, you're so weak, I'll overwhelm you completely. But that's why the condition is that the ayin also has to be coming down. So they both have to exchange their identities. So the ayin is helping the keli be more keli. The keli is helping the ayin be more ayin, but in a healthy way.
Even in life, husband and wife. If you have an ego and you don't negate yourself, then you can't work with somebody else.
Okay. And in general, this is the bittul. This is a beautiful line. The bittul, the sublimation of the body and soul and body, that they should not be like their fundamental, their fundamental nature, their essential nature. Both the soul, it shouldn't be an excessive, substanceless, and an apshata meaning like separate from or abstract from or like transcendent from the body. And also in its work, that it shouldn't be just on its own, it shouldn't be self-contained on its own, through which it becomes an excessive ayin, excessive lack of substance. And the same with guf. And the guf, the body should not be an excessive yesh, an excessive identity, an excessive ego, self. Rather, it should be a container. And the same, when the guf and nefesh, the body and the natural soul, are in excessive bittul, excessive sublimation, in general, that's when the body is in an immature state. And it's fundamentally, essentially not the level of a container. And being that it's in things that are good, it expresses itself in a excessive submission. The kolzeh, obviously this is not the kavanah, but he's just saying, he's qualifying. The gamzeh hu she'emed al etzem tivei. And this too is because he's standing and like abstinent, she'emed, he remains standing, but on his essential nature. Because the bittul of the guf, in this case, is of the body, is on its own, and not through work. So he just stands and remains stuck on his nature. And he's not a container, fundamentally a container. He added these words just to call, bottom line is they both have to go away from the tiva atzmi. So in these last words is really just going back, describing how the guf on its own is naturally on its own is still in a state of immaturity, and first it has to receive, and then it allows the neshama to mature it to be able to be a proper container. Okay, Kitcher, the summary. The purpose of the soul's descent below is in order to refine nafshi, meaning the natural and animal soul, with gufi and his body. Interesting, he uses neshama here on the nefesh alakis, and nafshi and nefesh abams, neshama and nefesh. Sometimes neshama is referred to as neshama, and nefesh is nefesh. It's like the biological, the nefesh ruach neshama, but sometimes it says nefesh alakis. Okay. Hein ba'aveda the Torah lahagber nefesh alakis lahatish nefesh abamos. Both in the work, in the service of Torah, to empower, to intensify the divine soul, and to weaken the animal soul. The Torah l'shmo schara v'dasa v'gam l'yavda al-kuch b'chush shchinta v'tachtein. In the parentheses, he has what he said in the parentheses, that Torah l'shmo, when you learn for an end as an end in itself, that's the reward of the Aveda, and it's also to unite the Kadosh Baruch Hu and the Shechina down below in the lowest worlds. And the work of mitzvos to bind the nefesh abamis alakus. So Torah or tefillah, like he said, also they strengthen the divine soul and they weaken the animal soul. Mitzvos bind the animal soul to the divine. So it's a different element, but both are necessary. Hakfiyah means usually the
submission.
Right. This
This is the binding.
Okay, the binding. That each mitzvah should in other words, bind and cause the nefesh abamis to submit to that mitzvah. And then he said again, parentheses, the mitzvah and my mitzvahs. That's the reward. The hein betfilah. She's bonus b'yishashus b'kli, and the same with davening. Now he says davening. Interestingly, before he said Torah and Torah mitzvahs, and he added davening as an example of some souls that davening. Now he's saying that his bonus is we're talking about davening, even though he doesn't mention davening in the actual thing, but he meant that. That's basically tefillah is what he's saying. So the second thing is tefillah, and the third thing is true. That the meditation, contemplation should be contained, should be settled, integrated in the container, and an internalized feeling, and in matters that are relevant to the animal soul, and in garments, in comprehensible garments, it means it should be able to appreciate and understand it. So that's the neshama. So the neshama has to have all these elements that connected to the soul, to the body rather, and the haguf have to have the opposite. The guf has to be a bitl hayesh, sublimation of the ego, self, of itself, shaloi, bitl hayesh shaloi ba'droga, in an organized and graded way, which means level by level. Rakshiyah kli, b'gufu shiyah bitl hayesh shaloi ba'droga, rakshiyah keli le'era neshama. What's the rak? Ba'gufu shiyah u'ba'guf. Okay. But it should, however, be in a way that it's a container for the soul's energy. And the summer, because being that, in other words, it shouldn't be an excessive bittul, which doesn't allow it to be a container. And the shama and the shama causes it to be a strong and healthy container by causing it to have a bittul that's deeper than it has on its own. Okay. So with this, we conclude chapter 302, pages 613 through 615.